Hi, and welcome to another endorsement interview with the Times Editorial Board. Today we have Ken Stevenson, a Republican running for Indiana State Representative in the 1st District. Welcome. I'm Doug Ross, editorial page editor at the Times. Also in the room with us we have Bob Heiss, editor, and behind the lens our usual Brian Vernellis, videographer. So we should probably start with the easy question, and that's tell us a little bit about yourself and how it prepared you for this race.
Well, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I'm running in the Indiana 1st District State Senate race. I've been thinking about what we need to do, where we need to go, how it can have a major impact on what happens, and how we need to make some major changes in the direction we're going.
Okay. One of the first things on everybody's mind is jobs, and specifically job creation. So what would you do?
Well, first of all, Indiana has to decide they want to be #1 in education in the country. Manufacturers and other people that are looking for employees want to come to a place that has great education, and we need to do everything we can to do that, whether it's preschool, whether it's elementary school, high school, or college. And we want to make sure we're the tops on that. With that, we want to make sure that that all of our preschool becomes fully funded, because that's key to making sure kids make it through school. Then we want to have our system so that we're at least helping our best performing academic students get as far ahead as they can in high school. And we want to make sure that the ones that are having the toughest time don't get left behind. The key to the ones that get left behind are the ones that the state has to do more than just sit back and let a district do whatever it's going to do. It has to step in, and it can't do like what we did with the school in Roseville. We waited 4 years, and that should have been done years before, and we need to not wait that long on things like that. From a real economic perspective, we need to make sure our college students, when they go through, they finish as quickly as they can, and they finish with little or no debt. Right now, students are strapped with debt, and they really can't contribute to the economy in any realistic way until they've paid off that debt. And we need them when they come out of school to really hit the ground running. The other thing we need to do is we need to have a good infrastructure. And to start with, we need a good transportation infrastructure. And that's roads that are well planned, well maintained. It's clear that our roads here are significantly different than what they are in Illinois. And we need to be better than what Illinois is, and right now we're not. We need to invest in fixing our bridges. We need to invest in keeping our roads maintained, to keep the potholes and other things on there. We need to make sure that they're set up to maintain the flow of traffic. And in addition to that, our transportation infrastructure also needs to include mass transit. We need to have ways to get people off the roads. We need to have ways for people to get around who don't have cars. Right now, we have what I would call a mediocre transportation system. We've got the South Shore that runs through the northern fringe of the county, and they need something that covers the whole part. We have a public transportation we have a bus system that barely covers parts of Gary or parts of Valparaiso and stuff like that. And they don't really run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to support our biggest manufacturers, and they need to do that. And the other half of that is right now our system is set to feed Chicago and the Chicago metropolitan area. And we also need it to work the other way. The first train in the morning doesn't leave Chicago until 6 a.m. And that train, when it comes here, it can't even get someone to work on time at U.S. Steel or Methodist Hospital or Community Hospital. And we need to make sure that train runs both ways and it feeds people both ways, because employers want to have access not just to our market here, but to the labor market in Chicago as well. And there are people in Chicago that are highly talented that companies can use here. And those companies, if we can't let those people get here on public transportation, those companies will not come here. And they're big companies.
So the question is, how do you pay for it?
With mass transit, you got to make sure, first of all, you got to make sure you price the tickets right so that people are paying, their fair share, that those that use it. Right now, many of our mass transit groups are paying probably less than what they should be paying. The second thing is we need to make sure we allocate that money right, that we are allocating to it. We need to have some kind of supporting long-range, reliable tax support that does that. My my recommendation is to use a gasoline tax to do that, to fix the roads and stuff like that. And the reason that is that's worked in the past. And in the short term, I think it'll work in the short term. Long term, we're going to probably have to come up with something else because fuel consumption is steadily declining as far as per person type fuel, And we'll have to come up with some other ways to do that. With maintaining the roads, we may want to have some kind of tire tax. Whenever you buy a tire, part of that goes to pay for the road tax as well. But it should be self-supporting. And then, of course, in certain cases, we want to have tolls pay for the road.
Okay. Speaking of tolls, the Indiana Expressway is, obviously proposed. What do you think?
Well, my experience is that as a taxi company guy, I drive on I-94 all the time, and we need to pull people off of that. The other thing I know is that the people in Newton County I meet, and I don't represent Newton County, but I know they want to see that toll road as well, because those trucks that would normally ride on that toll road are now riding on Highway 10. I personally have had an accident on Highway 10, so I understand how that road is and how dangerous it is. And the people in Lake County don't see that, but I see that where those trucks have gone, and I've dealt with people over there before.
Okay. We should go back to your education issues. One of the things that happened after the last budget was adopted by the legislature was the CC agency was created, and some have called it like a shadow Department of Education rather. And so what are your thoughts on whether that agency should be kept, and frankly, how do you resolve the differences between the state board and the superintendent?
Truthfully, that agency, I see that as another layer of government that we really don't need. How they put it out there, it almost seems like it would be some type of foundation versus a government agency. It does many of the same things that the superintendent should be doing, and if we're running two agencies, how do you hold any one of them accountable? There's no place where you can really say the buck stops here. And we need to have one center where that is. If we had an appointed superintendent, that agency would never be there. And what it needs to be is that the education needs to fall on the shoulders of the superintendent. We need to hold her accountable. And right now, with that second agency, that really doesn't allow us to do it.
Okay, so you'd push for an appointed superintendent, or?
Well, what I'm saying is, if we had an appointed superintendent. Personally, if it was up to me, we would have an appointed one, but I mean, that's not a key issue with me, whether a superintendent is appointed or elected. But like I said, the agency, like I say, it allows for divided responsibility, and when you're in government, you need to kind of have centralized responsibility.
Okay. If you're elected, you'd be, one of 50. What would be your first priority?
Well, first priority, like I said, would be to make sure that Indiana decides it wants to be number one in education. We got to make sure that we don't stick it to our better performing district just because they can live with a smaller amount of money. We want to make sure our districts are thriving. We want to look at a long-term goal, like I said, for someone to flow through the Indiana system and not have to stop anywhere along the way because of lack of funding. We want to make sure that, like, when a kid goes to school, when I went to college, I got a scholarship. But my friends worked during the summer, and when they worked during the summer, the money they earned paid for their full year of schooling, and that's not now because somehow, someway, we've allocated money different within the university system, and now kids are leaving with $20,000, $30,000, $60,000 in debt. And that's the kind of stuff we need to change.
Okay, how would you go about changing that?
Well, I think we need to look and see where that money is going. I think a lot of tuition money is now going to pay for research, which probably should be paid for some other way. And if they have research, maybe that should be paid by the corporations that benefit from that research. Whether it's medical research, whether it's manufacturing research, or whatever. And the students should be paying for their schooling. And then, like I say, it needs to be at such a level, like I said, that they can pay for it and not have to take on debt. Everybody complains about the country taking on debt. The last thing we want to do is have people with an education and then be stuck with debt. Germany has set up where their kids don't pay any tuition at all, and their kids, when they leave school, they can hit the ground running. Their economy is going to take off, and our economy is going to drag because our kids are leaving school with debt. We need to change it. That's not going to change during my first year there. That may not change if I'm there for 4 years, but we need to be heading in that direction. And that's my first priority.
Okay. We should look at casinos. The conversation is about how do we save this industry, that the number of jobs has been shrinking, and do we go to land-based? What do we do?
Well, they need to be flexible about that. As far as how they look at that there, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what I understand why people have an issue with the expansion of gambling, and it is gambling. If they want to move that casino to be at the intersection of 65 and 94, I don't think there's any real difference from a state perspective that makes it worse to do that or whatever. But if it would attract more business, I don't have any problems with them relocating that casino. That won't be one of my priorities, but if they were to do that, I would support that move.
Okay. In terms of the Regional Development Authority, it's up for reauthorization. It gets $10 million a year currently in state funding. What would you do?
I would reauthorize it at the same level. Right now, our local governments, for whatever reason, can't seem, they're never going to get together and do these regional projects on their own. And that agency, in a sense, gets everybody together and makes things happen. So we need to continue to fund that. In addition, even if somehow our local agencies were able to get together, that agency would provide money we wouldn't have to provide. That would provide the magic funds for state and federal funds. So we need to keep that. That's a key item for development and employment growth in this area, and quality of life growth as well.
And you mentioned the trains earlier on, but let's be specific about the South Shore expansion.
My thought on the South Shore expansion is I think that it's more than, we need to look at more than just the option of taking it south through Hammond into Dyer. Right now they're talking about $80 million a mile. If we're going to spend $80 million a mile, we got to spend $90 million a mile and make it a high-speed rail. I mean, that's the current cost of high-speed rail. I don't know why it costs $80 million a mile. I haven't seen anything. I've tried to look for stuff on that. The standard around the country for normal rail like that would be about $23 million a mile. And the western, I guess what's called the Westlake Corridor with Metra, there is a significantly less than that as well. And of course, we just hired this Metra guy, and I'm praying that he can somehow at least get us the same price the Metra's getting for theirs. It's something that's key. I mean, from my perspective, I think rail running through the region, whether it's stops in Dyer, runs through Cedar Lake, St. John, and down to Lowell, and then runs out to Valparaiso, I think it's key. You look at Naperville and Aurora, they have that Metro line that runs right down the middle. They have a PACE system that runs almost 24 hours a day. I run a taxi company. In Lake County, Porter County combined, we have less than 50 taxis for 750,000 people. In Naperville and Aurora, they have 3,000 taxis. And we don't want to necessarily have a whole bunch of taxis running around here, as our employment growth. But those 3,000 taxis support hundreds or thousands of people that are working. And that's what those taxis mean. They're merely a measurement of what's happened. And it's like night and day between us and that area as far as development goes. And if you go and you look on the Metro Electric line, the housing and the development that's taken place along the Metro line down in Olympia Fields, those aren't, they didn't build little slums around there. Those are $1 million houses around that Metro line. And people look at it and says, well, why should we help all those people with those big houses? Well, when those people have those big houses, assuming, of course, you don't tax everything you possibly can, that should cause somebody on the east end of Lake County's taxes to go down, because the tax base on the west end has gone up. So that should contribute quite a bit to alleviating tax burden around Lake County as well.
Okay. Bob, did you?
Well, we mentioned before the camera started rolling, you talk to people whenever you can.
Right.
When the taxi is somewhere, you'll talk to people. What are they telling you? What are they? What's the top thing or two they're talking about? And are they really engaged in potentially voting this year?
Well, I talked to a lot of people who aren't going to vote. They don't know why they're going to vote. That's just their thing. It doesn't seem important to them. There are people that do want to vote, and again, their big thing is jobs. A lot of, I've picked up all kinds of people. I pick up from the top end to the bottom end, and I mean, I don't pick up the very top, but I do pick up the very bottom, or at least I pick up people that have enough to get in a taxi and pay for a taxi ride. And I know that the big thing is whatever we can do to not make it any harder on the guy at the bottom. You know, not come up with all these fees. Not, you know, when you make a mistake and you go to court, you know, you shouldn't lose your car for minor offenses because you can't pay your fines. We need to do things where the little guy, we're not holding the little guy back. We need to do everything we can to do what we can so the little guy can pull himself out of the hole. And I see so many local governments and county government and state government that are, it looks like they're trying to hold the guy down, and I'm not sure why. You know, why do we have these huge court costs? Why do we have these huge fees for different things? And we need to have, you know, in a sense, a less regressive fee system. I'm not sure what I can do at the state level to stop the local governments from doing that, but that's something that I see, you know, when I talk to people.
Okay. What's the big difference between you and your opponent?
He's been there for 40 years. And I've been trying to get in, not necessarily for 40 years, but that's what's there. But I mean, we both, I know, have the same views on right to life. So he's there. He's, you know, my look at it is he's done honorable service. He has a nice family. He's part of the community. I think that if I was there, I would communicate significantly more and significantly better with all of my constituents. I would be more approachable, and they would have much more opportunity to, you know, to corner me and explain my place in life as their public servant, as they would say. I would be much more visible, and people would know where I stand, and at the end they would, you know, either put me in again or hang me. So.
Well, I don't think Indiana allows that.
That's right.
So what have we not asked that we should have?
Well, I know the governor is pushing HIP 2 as an alternative to the Affordable Care Act, and I think HIP 2 is a good plan if it's fully funded. If we do like we did with HIP 1 and underfund it so people are on a waiting list for a year, it'll be a failure. And we need to either fully fund it or go with the Medicaid expansion. You know, it's one or the other. And we don't want to have people running around without health insurance. Second thing, I know the governor has talked about some prison reform. I've been talking about prison reform with people I talk to for months. And, you know, I pick up various different people that have been there or have had family members there. I think the key thing is if we have a prison, we have a captive audience. And when we send 100 people in and then 100 people get out, we shouldn't have 30 go back. We need to come up with something that doesn't happen. And it hasn't always been that way, so I think there is some way to change that. I know when I talk to people that are successful, the key is when they come out of prison, like when you come out of college, you should hit the ground running. You know, if you're there for 5 years, there's no reason you shouldn't already have a job lined up when you walk out. When you come out, you don't want to. You know, when you come out of prison, the person who comes out of prison shouldn't be sent to the worst possible area to put them in. You don't send people that come out of prison back into Gary where unemployment is in excess of 50%. You send them to just some place where they can get around, where there's jobs and things like that. I picked up a gentleman in Crown Point who'd been in the state prison, and and I asked him, you know, what he'd done, and he said he was, he committed some major sexual offense. And lo and behold, they sent him to Gary. Why did he send him to Gary? Because in Gary there was a homeless shelter. You know, why did he not go back to the hometown he came from, which was Carmel, Indiana? You know, one of our richest communities. Why didn't he go back there where he could get a job and again hit the ground running? My guess, of course, is that, you know, he probably doesn't have a lot of family support back there, given his offense. But then again, their community should be the one that, in a sense, takes responsibility for him, and they need to step up. We need to not make it harder for our poorest communities by sending, you know, people getting out of prison back there and add additional burdens to what they have.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this endorsement interview with the Times Editorial Board. Ken Stevenson, Republican, seeking the Indiana Senate seat in District 1. Thank you for viewing.